Thank you, Dr. Snyder. I hope everyone can see my screen. We've allocated just 30 minutes to review a tremendous amount of work, so let's just jump right in. I'll start with a brief thank you to everyone who took the time out this morning to join me as I review what amounted to be a multi-year effort, complete with ups and downs and highs and lows and monumental obstacles. The title of my study, as you see on screen, is the product of two distinct efforts, separated or merged, depending on how you look at it, by a global pandemic. Before COVID-19, I was well on my way to working through introducing high school females to computing careers through the lens of project management. Because of COVID-19, the entirety of that work came to a halt and forced a shift to an assessment of the technological readiness and sustainability concerns among STEM teachers. This presentation will walk through both of those efforts up to the point where the work diverged and the focus was solely on STEM teacher assessment. As we go through these slides, you'll see the pre- and post-COVID sections called out. These, of course, point to their respective versions of my dissertation work. I'll do my best to keep us all on track as I describe what are essentially two studies. The context of the first version of the study included a group of 11th grade female students in a Title I high school in Palm Beach County, Florida. The study presented students with a series of after-school workshops that offered an authentic, hands-on introduction to project management within a computing context. Of course, the COVID-19 induced school closures forced the premature end of that study, resulting in the design of another study. The context of the new study took the form of an online questionnaire presented to STEM teachers of the same school where the original study was taking place, specifically teachers who were directly affected by the school closures. The problem that was being addressed by the first version of the study is both well-known and well-documented. There are a shortage of females at every level in computing, from teenage girls to college-age young women, to women in the workforce, to women sitting on the board of major technology firms. The disproportionately low number of females at every level in computing fields has been and can continue to be seen at both the national and global level. The new version of this study shifted to understanding the lived experiences of STEM teachers in Palm Beach County, who, with only just a few hours worth of notice and whether they were ready or not, were required to continue teaching while being 100% remote. The pre-COVID-19 plan was to pique students' awareness and interest in computing careers. Through interactive hands-on activities, they would have learned the project management competencies, interfaced with various computing professionals, and created authentic project deliverables. The revised goal aimed to understand the experiences of STEM teachers and the readiness and sustainability concerns they had after being abruptly transitioned from an in-person teaching environment to a fully online teaching environment. The pre-COVID-19 version of this work aimed to answer the question, how can an authentic, hands-on introduction to project management within a computing context facilitate participants' awareness of and interest in computing careers? The term authentic was rather deliberate here. Participants were to learn a complete project management cycle, not a distilled version or modified version, and their exposure to computing careers was going to be authentic as well. In the short time I was in front of them, they saw actual job listings for entry-level project coordinator roles, complete with salary information, as well as job listings for experienced project managers, including salary information. These were not only real, but they were also localized to the Palm Beach County area. Post-COVID-19, however, the research question shifted. The new research question asked, what insights can teachers provide from their first-hand experience with an unforeseen and widespread disruption of their teaching environment? By studying the results of a qualitative questionnaire and understanding the lived experiences of teachers, policymakers, school officials, students, and parents can better understand the technological readiness and sustainability concerns that were seen at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And through this understanding, develop strategies to mitigate the impact of future unforeseen and widespread disruption of the technological infrastructure needed for the continuity of education. The literature review process provides a synthesis of existing literature, an analysis of research methods used, and explores gaps and limitations in prior research. Although the analysis and synthesis of information is a continual effort throughout the research process, here is a snapshot of just the literature that informed this work. From longitudinal studies that link girls' interest in technology-based careers to lessons they learned in middle school, to the Executive Office of the President supporting children's education in computing, which was then funded by the National Science Foundation, to the creation of specific non-programming AP computer science courses with the express intent of bringing in more female students, to proving that more work is needed on this front, all the while standing on the shoulders of giants, the literature review was an exhaustive process that, in my case, targeted 8 categories, which I then tracked and ensured each was well represented in my work. I won't take credit for this framework, though. Like many before me, I also stand on the shoulders of giants. And speaking of giants, the pre-COVID-19 methodology was informed by numerous seminal authors. The majority of what you see here was migrated over to the new version of the study, so let's spend some time on that. Cresswell characterized a single case study as one that focuses on a single instrumental case, and Yin distinguished between a representative case and a revelatory case. The prior version of my study was representative, or typical of the circumstances and conditions of a common everyday situation, as would be with a classroom setting. The revised version of the study was revelatory, which is where we, as Yin said, quote, observe and analyze phenomena previously inaccessible to social science inquiry. As it would be, that is a befitting description for research associated to the COVID-19 pandemic. The instrumentation, a 10-item self-administered questionnaire, as suggested by Baxter and Jack, substantiated the research question, was accompanied by propositions and issues, employed purposeful sampling strategies, and leveraged systematically collected and managed data. Considering open-ended questions can produce unexpected responses, Su and Ritter noted exploratory questionnaires early in the process of researching a topic can aid in the clarification of concepts, the formulation of problems, and the formation of hypotheses. In the revised version of the study, the analysis of qualitative data was performed using 3 methods: descriptive analysis, machine learning-based psycholinguistics analysis, and qualitative content analysis. The descriptive analysis used numerically described data to discuss the free text that was provided by the participants. The machine learning-based psycholinguistics analysis was used to understand how responses were emotionally and linguistically framed, and the qualitative content analysis was used to understand what was said. And finally, the reporting aspect of this methodological framework was informed by Yin's linear analytic approach. The approach is logical, comfortable, commonly seen in journal articles, in experimental science papers, and also in case study research. The analysis began with a data processing and cleansing effort. The process used is akin to a business principle known as data quality management. The cyclical process works to ensure data accuracy, integrity, consistency, completeness, and security. It essentially considers the data's origins, where and how the data moves over time, and that it is secure and properly backed up. Once the data was in a place where analysis could begin, the 3 types of data analysis were then systematically performed. The quasi-statistical rendering of data wasn't so much counting, but rather a description of the patterns in the data that were, in part, discovered and were then confirmed by counting. IBM Watson provided the machine learning model, which used linguistic analysis to detect tone across 7 dimensions: analytical, anger, confident, fear, joy, sadness, and tentative. Each of these 7 tones is considered to be either an emotional or a language type. The qualitative content analysis has 3 key characteristics. First, it reduced the data by assigning abstract categories to each passage of text. Second, it's systematic in that every passage was assessed more than once, with modifications made to the coding frame during each assessment. And third, it's quite flexible in that as categories and subcategories evolved from the specific to the abstract, retroactive changes were made to passages that were already categorized. Let's walk through a few examples of the results that came from each of these 3 levels of analysis. The descriptive analysis provided rich insight into the categorical makeup of qualitative data. The analysis enabled a quasi-statistical rendering of data by fundamentally reducing and transforming line-item level free text data into meaningful, numerically based categorical attributes. An example of that is the 10-item questionnaire, which was completed by 13 participants and yielded 128 non-blank data points. These free text responses were then expanded by sentence, which resulted in 235 analyzable non-blank data points. And these were comprised of a total of 3,212 words. In general, the participants' range of typed text was from as little as a word or 2 per response to about as much as a full tweet. This strict, albeit coincidental range helped ensure digestibility of the data. Additionally, the limited use of emoji, while just another coincidence, ensured that data could be analyzed without the need for subjective inferences as to the intended meaning behind the use of emoji. Also, 43% of sentences contained word counts above the mean, 57 sentences were on par with the average US word count per sentence, while 45 sentences contained above average US word counts, which are commonly found in government, scientific, and essential information documents. The machine learning-based psycholinguistics analysis was performed at 5 distinct levels: for all text for each participant, for each question, all text for each response, and all text for each sentence in a response. The entirety of the dataset, excluding question text, was analyzed as a single document. In this case, Watson returned numerical values for 4 dimensions: tentative, sadness, joy, and analytical. Values less than 0.5 were considered by IBM to be low and were omitted from the results. Values between 0.5 and 0.75 were considered to be medium, as is the case with the 4 values on screen. Data analyzed on a per participant basis meant all text for each participant was compiled and analyzed as individual documents. In the previous slide, I mentioned Watson omitted scores less than 0.5, which would have resulted in all tone scores being labeled either medium or strong. As prescribed by Watson, the text label low was simply not offered. To work around not having a label for low, I created an Excel formula to derive lower, middle, and upper third percentile cutoff points for the range of values present in each dimension. Results were then labeled as low, medium, or strong. This relabeling yielded 3 benefits. First, a label corresponding with low was now possible. Second, the visual of textual labels afforded me a cleaner workspace as opposed to working with a spreadsheet displaying hundreds of decimal points. And third, the percentile ranking considered the range of existing values for a given dimension across each level of analysis, thereby weighing tone scores as low, medium, or strong in the context of other scores within the same dimension, and specific to the level of analysis in question. This, for example, yielded a more representative low vis-a-vis medium or strong for each dimension at each of the 5 levels of analysis. Analyzing the data at the participant level also uncovered the confident label, which was not present in the analysis of all text. Additionally, this level of analysis exposed the distribution of tones across participants. For example, participant number 4 had only 1 tone associated, analytical, whose score was labeled as strong. Participant number 5 had analytical and joy, with joy being strong. And coincidentally, participant 5 was the only participant who used emoji in their responses. Next, tone scores were individually generated for all response data when grouped by question. The dominant tone, analytical, once again saw 100% distribution. The fear tone was also detected for the first time. The analysis of text for each response meant 128 non-blank responses were individually submitted for analysis. Whole responses containing analytical tone accounted for 35% of all contributed text. This denoted verboseness in intellectually inclined responses. During the analysis of text by whole response, neither anger nor fear tone scores reached the 0.5 threshold for detection. The analysis of text by sentence meant all 236 non-blank sentences were individually processed. Considering the granularity of this approach, it yielded scores for all 7 tones. 40% of sentences, or 93 of 236, were identified as analytical. 25% of sentences were labeled as tentative, and more than a third of these were scored as strong. The analysis provided insightful details regarding the degree to which participants responded from either an emotional or rational perspective. While the content submitted by participants was dominated by intellectually inclined tones, the revelation of emotional tones provided much needed context for the subsequent content analysis. None of this would have been possible without machine learning. After the machine learning-based psycholinguistics analysis was complete, the analysis shifted to the identification of repeating themes. As we previously saw, I started with 235 non-blank analyzable data points. An iterative process was then used to gather my thoughts and collect comments. I read through the entirety of the dataset twice and wrote down comments as I went along. The first iteration yielded 48 comments, and the second, an additional 109 comments. The third iteration saw the creation of the first coherent categorical codes. In the fourth iteration of the analysis, these codes were then analyzed, cleansed, curated, and reduced to 11 primary codes and 26 secondary subcategorical codes. With 100% of sentences having been analyzed and primary and secondary codes assigned, the fifth iteration of the content analysis saw the creation of thematic dimensions. The focus dimension answered the question, who is the participant talking about in this passage? My answer to that question was either teachers, students, school officials, or parents. The topic dimension was designed as a subgroup of the focus dimension. It basically functioned as a participle would in grammar, modifying the subject of the participant's response. The topic dimension labels were technology, teaching, learning, and administrating. For example, from the standpoint of administrating a process. The imperative dimension was designed as a categorical verb and nested as a subordinate to the topic dimension. Imperative labels were training, supporting, and acquiring. From the standpoint of grammar, the imperative label was akin to an action verb. For example, the supporting imperative label related to the action of being supported. The detail dimension was designed as a direct object of the verbs in the imperative dimension, and a total of 16 dimension labels were created. The next iteration of the content analysis saw the emergence of 4 thematic constructs: student needs, teacher needs, parent needs, and the role of school officials. Each of these was predicated upon the imperative dimensions, which were acquisition of resources, provision of support, and the need for training. As the time spent analyzing increased, so did the level of abstraction. The descriptive analysis provided rich insight into the categorical makeup of the qualitative data. A total of 12 distinct quasi-statistical descriptions of data were produced. The machine learning-based psycholinguistics analysis provided insightful details regarding the degree to which participants responded from either an emotional or a rational perspective. And the qualitative content analysis resulted in the development of comments, codes, primary and secondary codes, 4 thematic dimensions, and 4 thematic constructs. Let's move on to talk about the conclusions derived from the results of the analysis. A broad answer to the question at the heart of this study can be gleaned by studying the various flows depicted in this Sankey diagram. STEM teachers who experienced the abrupt transition from an in-person teaching environment to a fully virtual teaching environment were primarily concerned with supporting student technology needs, specifically related to software. Digital lessons were also a concern for teachers themselves, while the concern related to the role of school officials were centered on the provision of communication. And concerns related to parents had to do exclusively with accountability. The findings herein present significant implications for policymakers, school officials, teachers, and parents. That is in addition to its historical and academic contribution. We've all heard of the various DEFCON levels, 1 through 5, with 5 being normal readiness and 1 essentially saved for nuclear war. DEFCON, or Defense Readiness Condition, is a part of a short list of EMERGE-CON acronyms including LERTCON, REDCON, INFOCON, and the little-known COG-CON, which stands for the Continuity of Government. In this post-COVID era, it might be time we consider what I would call EDUCON, or the Continuity of Education Readiness Condition. Locally, school officials and teachers who currently have their hands full with mitigation planning, resource acquisition, allocation, and maintenance can look here for specifics on how to add to that planning. At home, it might be time we make continuity of education contingency planning a permanent fixture in the management of our households. And lastly, this work serves to document and describe a small portion of a pivotal moment in our history. It serves as an early contributor to what will invariably be an abundance of forthcoming academic work related to the impact COVID-19 had on technology-dependent education and government systems. A critical lesson I learned during this process is the dire need for data management rigor. Not just in terms of qualitative or quantitative data that is being analyzed, but also the literature review, maintaining a dictionary of terms and acronyms, backing up and versioning working files, incorporating external feedback, keeping tracks of notes made on the go, even file naming and folder naming. This entire effort was wholly dependent on data management rigor. Also, the process needs to strike a balance. While the presentation of an exhaustive qualitative analysis can overwhelm readers with detail and large passages of text, an abbreviated account, which may highlight a researcher's editing skills or data analysis skills or visualization skills, that may come at a cost of context. This study can be enhanced by exploring the viewpoints of teachers from other districts, from other grade levels, or from other locales, by leveraging semi-structured interviews to acquire additional depth, breadth, rationale, or sentiment from participants, or leveraging quantitative data to reach beyond Palm Beach County, and even by exploring the viewpoints of school officials and parents or policymakers. None of this would have been possible without the support of my committee, the teachers, students, and officials at Forest Hill High School, of course, the 13 anonymous participants, without the excellent administrative support of the folks at Nova Southeastern University, without the understanding and support of my friends, family, and coworkers, and without being afforded the most precious gift of all, time. Thank you all for your direct and indirect contributions to this work. For the adventurous out there, here's a list of the references used in the build of this presentation. The other 111 references are available in the dissertation itself if you're so inclined. And finally, it has been said that a good teacher is like a candle that consumes itself to light the way for others. For that selfless effort, for that labor of love, for that dedication to academic excellence and progress, even and especially through the unexpected, I am deeply grateful to Dr. Martha Snyder, Dr. Stephen Terrell, and Dr. Ling Wang. Thank you for your unrelenting support. Any questions?
I would like to just go ahead and say congratulations, Dr. Almeida. We're very proud of you. We're over the moon in terms of the work that you've done and the struggles that you've gone and overcome. And I'd like to, express our congratulations and with the group of 20 that we have here, join me in congratulating Jero. And the other thing I'd like to do, if you would stop sharing your screen, Jero, go ahead and stop sharing your screen. I would like to, for those of you who are able to turn your videos on, I'm going to go ahead and put ourselves in gallery. I want to capture this moment since, as Dr. Almeida said, and I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly.
You are. You are.
That we hope we have a commencement, but I think we've got a nice group of family and friends here that are really Jero's support system. That I'd like to take a screen capture. So a big smile. I'm going to go ahead and say congratulations, Dr. Almeida.